It's never too early or too late to introduce THRASS. And I'm going to say here to introduce what we're doing here with phonics. Right from the very beginning, I think it's important for teachers, I think it's very important for us as parents, grandparents, to understand the language that we speak. That to me is a really important part. And it's been very important to me, now being a grandmother even, that I understand my language way, way better than when I brought my own children up, that I understand my language, because I can then help my grandchildren. I can do things which I wasn't able to help my own children with, that I can now help my grandchildren with. So it's really important when people say, where do we start and how early is it to start? For me, you know, I had my grandchildren at 6 months. They would have a lot of fun with our picture cards. I'd use the phoneme grapheme cards, and we'd just look at the pictures. And they loved it at 6 months, sitting in a high chair, going, this is the picture of the panda. What's a panda? What does it look like? What sound does it make? What colour is it? We've got black and we've got white. Let's pick up another card. We've got, this is a frog. What's a frog? How many legs is a frog? Let's count them. You know, all that type of beautiful language work that we can do. Now that's just the start process of it, of inbuilding, so that they can have a look at what those pictures are and get to know the pictures on the chart. And then I used to just for fun throw them over and say, and this is when you get big, we'll learn the words on those charts. So then we can look at the words for that picture. I don't ever expect a child at any age from very early to be able to get into what the word is, but to understand there's a concept that we have a written system in English that is going to represent words to us is really important, because that's how we base our whole system in English, is around us. We have all this environmental print. As our children are, driving up the street, we see stop signs, we see give way signs, we see signs on shops and so forth. So print itself is a very important part of being able to live in society and live in society well. So the earlier that children actually understand print and what it is and what its functionality is, and I think that's really important to say it's a functionality, the earlier we can do that, the easier it is then for them to be able to understand this process. And I always say to everyone, one of the most important things that we ever do in teaching and learning is what we teach has to be systematic. Is really important, meaning that we can build on what our system is, moving from one place to another. But whatever we teach our children must be sustainable. So when we talk about sustainability and what is sustainable, it means that what I teach you today is not going to compromise my future learning. So that it's really important as parents that we think about, what we give you now mustn't compromise us later on. And that's why I say to parents, you always have to use the correct terminology from the very beginning. We see parents who allow children to say a word like bottle, and the parent repeats the word bottle if a child says this is bot. That's not good, because then the child thinks it's bot, until then further on down the track you're telling them it's not, it's a bottle, if that makes sense. I love, there's a really good meme that's around, which I love, and it's a little child playing with their toes, and they're looking down at their toes and being told they're actually toes, and went, are they really toes? I thought they were Piggly Wigglies. So it's really important that what we actually teach you from the very beginning is actually sustainable. And that's why it's important what we do here with THRASS. It is totally sustainable. I'm teaching you from the very beginning that we have pictures, and we can have pictures of things which depict words, and these pictures then have letters that we use to represent that word. So we're actually building in that whole system right from the start. And then if we take it on the other hand, it's never too late to introduce THRASS. If a child or an adult is struggling, it doesn't matter what a child or adult is struggling with, we can always intervene. It might take longer in some cases. It might be easier in some cases. I've always found that when I'm working with older children, it's easier for me to change around their behaviour, because first of all, they know how to learn. They've learned how to learn lots of things. So being able to then give them credit for what they have learned and how they learned, and then build on that learning, is so much easier. So when I'm working with a child who might be struggling in literacy, and especially if I take it into spelling and writing now, if a child, say, does misspell a word like was to me, one of the first things I do, I say, look, great, you're hearing all the right sounds in there if you've written W-O-Z. That's great. What you haven't got is you actually haven't understood the whole sound system of English. So I'm not saying to them, you're dumb, you can't do this, or this is hard. I'm just saying, you actually haven't got the whole game yet. There's a lot of little pieces that are missing. And that's what I find is so easy then using THRASS when I'm working with older children with intervention, because I'm not making them start from the very beginning over and over again. I'm not saying, you don't know that A can make A. And unfortunately, this is where a lot of remedial programs start. And they start by saying to the children, this is the letter A and its sound is A, A, A. So many of these children, I say all of them, know that A makes A. They just don't know that A can make other sounds. So the intervention process is really important, and it's important to us to know that we can intervene with anybody at any stage. And I know the number of adults that I've worked with who've struggled with literacy, and a number of them have been ESL learners as well, have said to me, I so wished I would have done this as a child. It's the first time that I've actually really understood about reading and writing, and I think that that's the important thing that we all have to hold on to. We can help anyone at any time. We always map the development of children with THRASS. First of all, we have in THRASS, we have a scope and sequence. Our scope and sequence is a very open scope and sequence, but what we expect children to be able to do at certain ages. It's very similar to when we're getting children, we look from children from birth and we say, what are the milestones that we believe that they should have? And that's what we do in THRASS. We believe there's certain milestones that we should get to at certain times. We can monitor those milestones. We have testing procedures that we use in THRASS. But for me, I've always found that the most important predictor of where a child is going and how they're working is just have a look at the work that they do. Sit down and read a book with them. If they're reading it fluently, they're doing a really great job. That's really important. The children are going to move ahead, but how they feel confident or competent in their own abilities to read is really important. They feel comfortable with reading. Then we can build on that. It's the same with spelling and writing. If a child feels confident about writing and feels competent in their own skills in writing, we can just keep building on that. I find that we have to spend a lot of time in testing procedures is when children are actually struggling. And that is because we're actually finding the point at where they're struggling. So for me, I watch children with normal progression, and it's no different to me watching a child learn to talk. We know that we have that window between a child of being, say, children usually start to actually say some words around about, say, 12 months of age, or a little bit earlier, right through to some children don't start speaking until they're 2.5 years of age. And we've got that window, that gap, but we know we're all going to end up talking. And the same thing with walking. Even though some children might walk at 8 or 9 months of age, we might have another child that doesn't start walking until 2. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with that child. It just means that they're taking longer to get to that particular milestone. But it doesn't mean that they're not capable of being able to do it. They are actually going to be able to do it. But monitoring the milestones is way more important. One of the big things that I find that's really difficult is that parents, once children start school or preschool, all of a sudden they're lumped into one group. Before they start school, everyone was happy that, some children start speaking at, 9 to 12 months. Some children don't speak until they're 2.5. They're happy that children walk at different stages and dress themselves at different stages and so forth. But the minute they start school, all of a sudden they've got to become this one big lumped group that are all going to follow the same progression day after day, week after week, year after year. It's not true. Once you start school, that progression, we've got some children who start in a classroom who can be over 12 months younger than the eldest child in that classroom. And so when you do a ratio of a child who is 5 years of age, a year difference at 5 years of age in ratio is huge. And what you learn in that year is massive. So I think that one of the things that I find very difficult with parents is when they want to push children or they listen to what other people's children are doing at that particular time and take their headset back to, was I worried about my child just because this child was up running around at 9 months and my child didn't start until they were 18 months?